There was a tweet I actually enjoyed that'll set this one up. You said that they say not to politicize mass shootings, but also don't want them studied as a public health matter. In what category should mass shootings exist? And this was one of the topics that we were asked to ask you about, is this sort of school shooting, gun control. And you touched on earlier where you say a lot of people think that we need more prayer. Well, I think the main argument from the other side would be that there needs to be more gun control. I'm maybe not going to ask you your opinion on that so much, but what other areas do you think that we could look at to combat situations like this? Because I don't want to say that it is the answer, but I'm from the UK. I can't really name you a mass shooting we've ever had. We probably have had a few, but certainly none that stick out in my mind. And this is a country where it's very illegal to own a gun.
Well, listen, the United States of Western developed nations has the most guns and the highest rate of death from mass shooting. So that's correlation. Okay, you still have to look at causation. I am more than willing to look at other aspects of this issue. So, for example, when in the last few weeks the right has been saying this is exclusively an issue of mental health, only nuts would do things like this. Well, it's not exclusively that, but if this is a factor, and I concede that to some degree there is something mentally going on with many of the people willing to do this, although the Buffalo Manifesto was quite cogent fascism, I will say. Yeah, but putting that aside, if we want to deal with the mental health aspect, I'm all for it. But what that would mean is required mental health screenings initially and periodically for you to have a firearm, actually funding better access to mental health services, which many Republicans who say it's a mental health issue have voted against funding. And number three, generally speaking, if there's so much problem with mental illness, we should try to reduce the ease with which mentally ill people can obtain firearms. So I have no problem dealing with the mental health aspect. Prayer, I don't think, is a factor. Now there's a lot of talk about doors in schools. The problem isn't guns, but it's how many doors the school building has. Ted Cruz and others have talked about it. It almost sounds hysterical to hear it. I'm fine thinking about the security setup in and around schools. That's great. Most of the suggestions are either impractical and or also wouldn't apply to other places where we've seen shootings, including movie theaters and grocery stores recently, et cetera. So, but I'm not saying do not talk about school security. It's fine to talk about school security. Arming teachers seems crazy. So for me, I think this is, there are some maybe on the left who say we shouldn't even talk about any of those things. I'm fine talking about those things in proportion to the degree to which I think they're a problem, but the guns have to be the starting point for the conversation. And I put out a list of 10 different things I would do specifically on gun safety without eliminating the Second Amendment. We have a Second Amendment, you can keep it, but I think that that's where you have to start.
Yeah, and again, I'll hold my hands up. I don't really know much about gun control in the USA, other than from what I get on TV. But maybe you could enlighten me. If I was an American citizen and I wanted to get hold of a gun, how easy would it be for me to do that?
It depends on the state, and it depends on where you want to obtain the firearm. And so there's no way that I could give you the full patchwork of laws, but there are states which have so-called constitutional carry, which means you don't need a permit or training. You can just basically have a firearm. There are differences there's kind of sometimes three layers of the ability to purchase a firearm, but you can't carry it with you, concealed carry, and I forget what the other, not concealed carry, exposed carry. I know that there's another word for it, visibly carrying firearms. Depending on the states, sometimes there is reciprocity on the permits and sometimes there is not. Depending on where you go, and if you obtain a firearm from someone you personally know, there might or might not be a background check. Only 22 states and Washington, D.C. require a background check. So it's a patchwork of different laws. It would be shockingly easy for you to get a firearm, generally speaking.
Wow. I guess the big problem, so to speak, would be how, if it is so easy and so many people own them, how would you even begin to recall them?
Yeah, well, this is a big thing where anytime you want to talk about restrictions, people start saying you're confiscating guns like a Nazi, right? And the truth is, you would put in place a bunch of gun safety regulations. You would probably offer some buybacks where people are paid for firearms that are no longer in compliance that they willingly turn in. And then there would be some time period after which having certain firearms would become illegal. I mean, it all has to be done thoughtfully and coherently. And unfortunately, it's so polarized that it's hard to really even have these conversations.